Hello, welcome to the June episode of Occupy Reports. We have this show every month on the first Tuesday of each month. We're live at 2 o'clock from 2 to 2:30. We're glad you're here. We're glad to be here. And our overarching theme is money in politics, great big money donations in politics. Today we're going to discuss the specific topic of the disempowerment of women. From my perspective, women hold up half the sky. And so I do believe that in general, women should be empowered as men. And I think they should vote, etc., etc., etc. So today we are interviewing Buffy Queen, who is the community educator of REACH of Haywood County. The REACH in Jackson County has recently closed. So their clients are some going to Haywood County, some going to Macon County. And in general, programs for women, the funding is very precarious. And I really want to support the programs that we do have. And I am really looking forward to hearing what you have to say today. So, what would you like to talk about?
Well, Ann, thank you so much for inviting me to come on behalf of the organization I work with, REACH of Haywood County. We've been around for over 30 years. Here comes our water.
Here comes our water. Thank you.
And I've been involved with REACH for coming on 9 years now. As the community educator, I'm on the prevention side. Now, what REACH does is we serve survivors of domestic violence, dating abuse, sexual assault, and elder abuse. We have advocacy, we have community outreach and prevention, and we want to empower women and men to be able to live a self-sufficient life free of violence. We want a peaceful home and peaceful relationships, and that's a big canopy, it really is. But I'm on the prevention side, so I go into the middle schools in Haywood County, all 3 of our public middle schools, and I do a program called Safe Dates, which is a research-based, accredited, accredited program. The research was done in Eastern North Carolina by a PhD doctor from Chapel Hill. And so this has been around for a number of years. And it really shows that if you reach kids around that age, before they're really starting to date very much, they may not be dating yet, but boy, they're thinking about relationships. And when they have one, and when they have a girlfriend or boyfriend, if you reach them at that age, when they are thinking about it, they are more apt to really consider how they treat their partners in the future. And these are co-ed classes, because if you don't reach the boys and the guys as well as the females, then 85% of abusers are male. So
85%. I wondered
yes,
what the percentage was. I knew it wasn't 100.
It sure
85.
Is. Yeah. And so it's just it's a perfect time.
Well, you
reach
said
kids.
middle school, and I just thought, oh, perfect, because that's when they're forming their values.
Exactly.
They're talking to each other about how their views are being formed of the other sex and which sex they're going to identify with and how they're going to treat them, how they're going to allow themselves to be treated.
Yes.
That's such a target age to
It is to really reach them, and that's where prevention's it's all about. So I always say at the start of the class, because I don't want to come into class and be, here's an outside expert who knows everything and doesn't care about the kids in the class, and it's quite the opposite. And also, they're very interested in relationships. That's all they're interested in sometimes. So you really have their attention, and I always say, okay, who here in class would like to date anytime in the next 40 years? And they all laugh, and they all raise their hand. And then I say, so this might be a topic you really might be interested in. And sure enough, they do. And they're so, it's a very interactive program.
I bet they have stuff to teach you.
Well, of course, absolutely. I'm their grandma's age, But I tell them, hey, I still date. I'm single. I still date. So
Yeah.
at least they go, oh, okay. But yeah, and I don't come in as the expert. I just say, and also another thing is I share some personal experiences that I've had with myself personally, involved in an abusive relationship when I lived in California, and also helping a friend get out of a very abusive relationship. This was a number of years ago, but so, and there again, when you share something that you really went through or you helped someone, their eyes get like this, you know, they're just all ears. An adult actually sharing with them honesty and what really happened, so it's a great program, and I really enjoy it. But REACH also does many other things. We have a beautiful shelter in downtown Waynesville. It was recently renovated a couple of years ago, and just, it's gorgeous.
Another thing for which funding is precarious.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I want to support.
Thank you so much.
If those people that use that shelter have nowhere to live,
Right.
then they will be homeless.
Absolutely, and that is the step. They are actually considered homeless being in our shelter, and so that gives them access to certain services that may not have otherwise.
Can they register to vote
Yes, they can, of course.
from there?
Yes, yeah,
They can use that
absolutely.
as their residence.
Yes, they certainly
And be
can.
enfranchised to vote.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super.
Yeah.
What a
and,
great thing.
Well, it is, and it's important, and so, but oftentimes, that's sometimes the last thing on their mind because
Yeah.
they're thinking of their safety. They've escaped from a very abusive relationship. They're thinking of their children, if they have children. The average person who comes to our shelter is 24 and has 2 small children. That's the average age. And some people stay in our shelter for a couple of days. Maybe they're waiting for their family to send them a bus ticket or a plane fare or something like that, or to come pick them up, if they have still, you know, in touch with their family. But we found that more and more there's a longer stay now, and we can keep someone for 90 days. At that point, it's considered emergency sheltering, and longer than that, it's considered long-term sheltering. So our funding is for emergency sheltering.
Yeah.
But there again, you know, someone who is just coming out of a relationship, they've had no control over the money in the relationship. They have had been discouraged often for finding a job or getting future education. They've been discouraged from having friends or making friends. If you just think about it, how would you totally set up a new life in a couple weeks, you know? So that's something people often ask is, well, why does she go back?
Or why doesn't she just leave?
leave?
Yeah.
And if you really think about it, ask yourself, you know, what would you do if you tonight had to leave, if you tonight had to take your 2 rambunctious children and the dog and go camp out on your younger brother's couch in his apartment, you know? How would his 2 roommates like that?
Yeah.
Or your family has kind of washed their hands because the person you're with has so alienated them that you've lost that contact, and that's what they wanted. So it's a very complicated situation.
That's what they wanted. You mean the abusive spouse?
Yes, right. They want to isolate.
Wants to isolate
Often.
the other one.
Yeah. On average, the person who walks through our door at REACH in our office has given their partner 7 chances to change. 7 chances before they come through on average. Now, some people, after the first abusive episode, they're in our office.
Mm-hmm.
But others keep hoping for 10 years or 20 years that it will change and that he'll finally come to his senses, or he will stop being so mean. And often they're in love with that person too.
Or he or she, yeah.
Yeah, and it could be she, of course.
And they're taught in
Mhm.
in church and also growing
Right.
up that if they just continue to love, that
You can love somebody out of it.
that,
and-
that either the person will change or they'll get their reward in heaven, or that it's you know it's
Yeah.
it's the right thing to do to
Yeah.
put up with it.
Right. And it is very much a societal issue, and it's around the world. And there's a lot of patriarchy involved too. one gender saying, I am more important, my thoughts are more important, my feelings and my desires for my family are more important than yours. And so they put down everything else. And that is changing. It's changing. People are, and our younger generation are much more aware of that kind of oppression. But it's something still our society has to deal with all the time.
Well, that's one of the reasons I've asked you.
Thank you.
When I found out what you were doing, I thought, oh, that's where she is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay. There's a lot to be learned. So where might someone who needs your services find them?
Well, most counties in North Carolina do have access to services for domestic violence and sexual assault victims. We prefer to call them survivors.
Survivors.
Victims is more of a legal law enforcement term, whereas survivor is more of an advocacy term. But either way, in every county there should be some access. And our state provides funding. Our state provides some funding for shelters in almost every county. Not everyone though, but so they could call the National Domestic Violence
The National
Hotline.
Domestic
Domestic Violence
Violence
Hotline.
Hotline. National Domestic Violence Hotline.
Right, no matter where they are, and that will give them, then they'll tell their place, and that will tell them what's the closest shelter or advocacy group where they can get,
Right.
Court advocacy also. We have someone who goes with our clients when they're going to court to get, say, a protective order, or their partner has been charged with crimes, so they might be under criminal trials and things like that, and we have someone who goes with them to support them. We also have tremendous access to Legal Aid of North Carolina. They provide attorneys for our clients.
So advocacy, that word, I like that word.
Yeah.
It sounds great. Seems like
Yeah.
you're describing it.
It means being on the side of that person. And
Yeah,
it's a big
doing-
word. People in our movement know advocacy, but it's not a common word that the average person
It's
just
not.
trips off their tongue.
It's
You know?
not, and
Yeah.
it sounds like it means being the public face of a person who has no idea what the public even means.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It just means somebody who's on your side, somebody who will take the place of one of your best friends who lives across the country and can't be there with
Who
you.
knows what to do?
Right.
Who to call? What
Yes.
needs to happen?
Has resources, yeah. And we also give referrals to other agencies,
Ah, yeah.
because often they need help. They need food stamps, they need housing help, all kinds of things like that. So it's a great thing. REACH and all the other agencies, it's a hard job too, I'll tell you. Some of our
I can just imagine some of the things that go on. I've seen some of it personally. I myself stayed in a marriage longer than I would have had I not been raised to think that if I just loved him enough, he would change.
Yes, boy.
And
Yeah,
if I
here we go.
and if I had enough resources
Yeah.
to afford myself food, clothing, shelter,
Right.
and it took me a good year or so to get my feet under myself to figure out that I could care for myself enough to exist separate from that marriage, because I had relied on my father and then my husband,
Mhm.
and I had not been a person in the public world. And I'm a smart, intelligent person. I figured it out quickly, and I knew to ask for help and to take that help and to use the advice I was given. But I know very well I had girlfriends who did not.
Right.
And there were people that were just horribly oppressed, had no clue what to do, where to go. So that's why I'm asking you,
Right.
Sure,
There's a national hotline. They can always Google REACH of Haywood or REACH of Macon.
Reach
in
of
this
Haywood,
area.
Reach of Macon, so
Uh-huh,
REACH of
Uh-huh.
Haywood County
Uh-huh.
and of Macon County.
Right. We all have websites. We're on Facebook too. We're on Twitter. But yeah, almost always Google will be able to find you. Domestic violence shelter, you could even enter in. And then the area you're in, your town.
Domestic violence shelter.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
because I had no idea that my situation was moving in that direction.
Right.
It was nowhere near there,
Yep.
but it had the signs
Sure.
that it would have gotten there eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was my saving grace, Anne, was that when I was living in California in Los Angeles pursuing a career in acting, I met a young man and we fell in love and all of that kind of thing. But my saving grace was that I had my own place to stay. It was my place. It wasn't his. And so when our relationship ended by my housemate, one of my housemates calling the police and having them come and basically escorting him out and all of that, that I still have my place. And but how often is that? Most of the time, it's the other way around.
Yeah, I was
and so
married
that person
and had nowhere to go.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, absolutely.
Line all that stuff up.
Right.
And I did leave a whole year before I actually stayed gone. I went right back
Okay.
for economic reasons.
That's the most common one.
And of course, I loved him.
Yes.
You know, and the thing is, I still love him. It doesn't mean I'm going to let him abuse me anymore.
Right.
I mean, that's
Sure,
been,
sure.
I was, what, in my 30s or something?
Right.
And now I'm in my 60s.
Sure.
And I can still remember the wonderful things about that person, and it was
Yeah.
going to be awful if I stay.
Exactly.
I'm looking over this list of signs to look for
Mhm.
in a battering personality. Check, check, check.
Yeah.
It was growing
Yeah.
along.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And of course, most people who are in an abusive relationship do love their partner. They just want the abuse to stop. You know, and so that's easier said than done. There is a wonderful organization in Haywood County called Meridian Behavioral Health, and they have a batterers treatment program there. So,
I was going to say, what about the other person
Yeah.
in this relationship?
Right.
Because if I don't stay there and love him or her, what's going to happen to him
Yeah.
or her?
Yeah.
He'll just fall down the rat hole and
No, they'll just find another victim.
find somebody
Yeah,
else to abuse.
and often it's quite amazing sometimes when we'll have a client come in and we're helping them with their protective order, and they'll give us the name of the abuser, and of course it goes in our system, and then we'll look, and often that abuser's been the abuser for several other people that we've already helped, and of course we don't disclose that, you know,
Yeah.
because it's 100% confidential, but they're serial abusers. The same in sexual assault. Most men are not rapists, but most rapists are serial rapists. And so you see that pattern going on now
Oh.
so much in the Me Too movement
Yeah.
too. So
Exactly.
Mhm.
I had a phone call from somebody asking me about so-and-so and why did I get divorced, and I wasn't divorced yet. And I said, this is too personal, why are you asking me? And he said, well, he's fixing to marry my sister, and I need to know if there's something I want to tell her. And I said, yeah, you need to tell her he's still married to me, and don't marry that.
right.
And so he had already
Wow,
was
lined up somebody else.
engaged
Yeah.
to his next
Oh my.
person.
Sure.
So this is definitely personal.
Yeah, yeah. And it's amazing how many women that we would know, and through our lives, who it has not touched them in some way. If it's not domestic violence, it could have been teen dating abuse, it could have been sexual assault, and even rape. So
It can
again, it's
just
gender-based violence.
it can just be going in a store and having the clerk be a male who talks to your chest instead of your face. You know, I mean, just the other day I was standing at a counter and I was leaning down and and I finally held my pocketbook up in front of my chest, and he still didn't look at my eyes. He looked away. And I thought, where has that person learned to objectify me, old enough to be his grandmother, like in that way?
Sure. And I can see how you would take that naturally, because that's happened to us many times, right?
And I used to just I used to
Right.
just not even notice it.
Sure.
And then I started noticing it and being intimidated by it. And now I notice it and I'm confrontational.
Sure.
Like, I'm up here, I'm not down there.
Also, just one little side thing is Asperger's syndrome and on the spectrum tends to make people not do eye contact so much. So maybe that was what was going on with him. Who knows?
That's a good idea. I never thought of that. But that could be why he still didn't look at me. He looked away.
Yes.
But still,
Yeah.
why did he choose
Of
my
course.
chest to look at to start with, you know? And it was
I
a,
I know. Yeah, because we've been conditioned to think that's what's going on.
and that's
Those
part of what I
conditions.
want to support is the education of people out of that mindset and into the valuing of each other as humans,
Absolutely.
no matter what gender they're identified with,
Right.
and how they choose to live their lives in that respect, that they're valuable for what they're valuable for.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean you have to participate
Right.
with them in
Right.
what they
Yeah.
choose,
Mhm.
but you do have to respect.
Surely. There's several men's groups too, men of goodwill, and we have to have men of goodwill joining this movement and being on our side. It's extremely important. One is called A Call to Men, and that there's
A Call to Men.
Call to Men. There's a national organization for those.
National organization, A Call to Men. Yeah.
Right. And just supporting women and children in
Well,
compassion and
Compassion for the men,
partnership.
because they have no idea that A, they're doing anything wrong, or B, that there's anything else to do. And I feel so sorry for, like, that young man that I encountered in the store the other day. His role in this society is not defined anymore. I mean, we're all at sea when it comes to what our roles are vis-a-vis the opposite sex, or even the same sex, if that's where we're oriented. And here we don't have manufacturing jobs. The farming has been all discombobulated, and the typical roles of the man in the working class society, they can't get a job in the factory, they can't work on the farm, they can't, like they used to, and yet they're not told what to do instead. And you're not supposed to be this power over male person anymore. And I see all these young girls, they're so aggressive, and they've just sort of taken on the male role, and now they're the aggressors. That's not the solution either.
No.
And so I really think that what you're saying about advocacy for the
Right.
victim, and also the support group for the abuser.
And it's effective. This is a 6-month program that Meridian offers, a batterer's treatment program. Batterer. And it really helps the men involved to know this is not the way to treat people. And
It's not the
counselors
way
really,
to treat yourself.
Of course not.
Because
Of course
their
not.
own self-esteem
Sure.
will be raised by learning
Absolutely.
better.
Yeah, and a lot of times one of my classes with my 7th and 8th graders is, why do people abuse? Because a lot of studies have been done on teens and young adults, and they know that it's wrong to be mean to your dating partner. They understand that. So why do they? And so we do go into that as far as insecurity, a lot of times on the batterer's part, poor communication skills. Maybe they've never seen two people sit down and actually talk about a problem and work out a solution.
Never seen it. Yeah.
Never seen it, don't understand it. And it doesn't go on in their relationship, so they just think, well, it's normal to yell and scream at your partner, and somebody to cry, and somebody to throw something, you know. And
Or walk out of the room and slam the door.
Yeah. And so, and also, of course, drugs and alcohol can have an effect on it. It doesn't cause someone to be abusive, but a lot of times it gives them the excuse to act that way. You know how I get when I've had a couple too many, you know.
Yeah, or I
Yes.
know how you get, therefore I'm going to be aggressive. Yeah.
Truly.
And role models.
Right.
So this is especially timely with all the exposés that are happening on the national level of abuses that are being exposed, and that that what you're doing is a positive step of
Yes.
advocacy for a better model.
Right.
And so we've ripped the lid off the can of worms of sexual abuse. It is no longer an in the closet subject. It can now be talked about, and so, oh, it's just awful. But what do we
can I
do?
do? Yeah.
What can we do to make
Yeah.
this better?
And that's why we had the Me Too rally at the end of April in Haywood County, because women have found that for healing to happen, you have to be able to tell someone, even if you don't want to go into the details, even if it was 20 years ago. It doesn't matter. Just being able to say, me too.
Me too.
It happened to me too. And then find a good friend, find a good family member to talk about it. And then the healing can begin.
Yeah. Okay, well, gee, I wondered what we were going to do with a 30-minute show, and
It flew.
it flew by. So thank you.
Still have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Buffy Queen. This is the community educator of REACH of Haywood County. This has been Occupy Reports. We are the visual arm of Western North Carolina, We the People. We encourage you to go to Western North Carolina, We the People. Let's see, what is it? WeThePeople.org. NorthCarolinaWeThePeople.org. And North Carolina, NC, WeThePeople.org. And sign the petition and click on the button to send a message to all the members of the Rules Committee in both the House and the Senate in the North Carolina Legislature to get our initiative on the ballot to allow the people of North Carolina to stay. We do not want money to be free speech, and we do not want corporations to have constitutional rights. So anyway, let's onward and upward, and thank you, Buffy, so much for coming out today.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure.
Oh, it's definitely a treat for us. Thank you. Bye-bye.